The Omega tribute was where you went when your pack had no use for you. And as Sable stood among the discarded wolves being offered like scraps to settle debts, she kept her eyes fixed on the ground. She knew better than to look up. 3 years of serving Alpha Varen's cruelty had taught her that much. She was the lowest of the low. An Omega with no family, no protector, and no value beyond whatever menial task she could perform. Varen had made that clear when he'd announced she would be part of the tribute to the Ironvale pack. A gift, he'd called her with a sneer. To show good faith. Everyone knew what that meant. Disposal. But it was the Alpha of Ironvale who frightened her most. Cormac Ashvane. They said his wolf had gone silent 3 years ago, the night he rejected his fated mate. They said he was half dead now, ruling with cold logic while the absence of his wolf slowly consumed him from within. They said he felt nothing, wanted nothing, and would let nothing stand in the way of his pack's dominance. So when the doors of the Great Hall opened and that broken Alpha walked in, Sable expected him to pass by without a glance. She expected to be assigned to kitchens or laundry, invisible and forgotten. She did not expect him to stop. She did not expect the entire hall to go deathly silent, and she certainly did not expect to feel something ancient and primal ripple through the air between them, something that made her Omega Wolf, dormant and suppressed since the night she witnessed something no 14-year-old should ever see, suddenly lift its head for the first time in 3 years. Her, Cormac said, his voice rough as if he hadn't spoken in years. I'll take her. The hall erupted in chaos, but all Sable could focus on was the look in his eyes, not cold, not dead. For the first time in 3 years, something was burning behind them. His wolf had woken, and it was staring directly at her. Neither of them understood yet what that would mean. Neither of them knew that the rejection which had silenced his wolf and the secret she carried in her blood were threads of the same twisted fate. All they knew was that something impossible had just happened, and impossible things always came with a price. The great hall of Blackmere Hold smelled of desperation and old stone. Sable stood at the end of the line, her thin dress doing nothing to ward off the cold that seeped up from the floor. Beside her, 2 other Omegas shivered, their eyes darting nervously toward the dais where Alpha Varen sat with calculated disinterest. This was the Omega tribute. A tradition as old as the packs themselves, though tradition was a kind word for what amounted to sanctioned disposal. When debts needed settling, when alliances needed cementing, when an Alpha wanted to rid himself of wolves too weak or troublesome to keep, this was where they ended up. Sable had known this day would come. She'd known it from the moment Varen's Luna had looked at her with those cold, assessing eyes 3 years ago and declared her adequate for labor, nothing more. What she hadn't known was who would be receiving them. The Ironvale delegation approaches, my Alpha, a guard announced. A ripple of unease passed through the gathered wolves. Ironvale, the pack whose Alpha had become legend for all the wrong reasons. Sable had heard the stories. Everyone had. 3 years ago, Cormac Ashvane had stood before the entire supernatural world and rejected his fated mate. The words had barely left his mouth before his wolf went silent, completely, utterly silent. Not dormant, not angry, not hiding. Gone. For a shifter, that was a death sentence. Slow, agonizing, inevitable. The wolf was half their soul. Without it, they withered. Most wolves who lost their connection didn't survive more than a year. Cormac had lasted 3. They called him the Hollow Alpha now, a king with no wolf, ruling through sheer will and brutal efficiency while his own body betrayed him more each day. Rumors said he couldn't shift anymore, that his eyes had stopped changing color, that he moved through the world like a ghost wearing flesh. The doors groaned open. Every head turned, every wolf fell silent, and Sable felt the change in the air before she saw its source. A pressure, a weight. The unmistakable presence of an Alpha whose power hadn't diminished even as his wolf had faded. Cormac Ashvane walked into the hall like he owned it. Behind him came his beta, a scarred woman with watchful eyes, and two guards whose hands rested casually on their weapons. Sable couldn't look away. He was tall, taller than Varen, with dark hair cut short and severe. His face was all sharp angles and hard lines, handsome in the way a blade was handsome, beautiful, yes, but designed to cut. And his eyes, pale gray like winter ice, swept across the hall without warmth or interest. Those were the eyes of a man who had stopped feeling anything a long time ago. Varen rose from his throne with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Alpha Ashvane, welcome to Blackmere. I trust your journey was uneventful. Skip the pleasantries. Cormac's voice was low, rough, like he wasn't used to speaking. You owe my pack a debt. I'm here to collect. A muscle twitched in Varen's jaw, but his smile held. Of course. Direct as always. He gestured toward the line of Omegas. As promised, 3 wolves from my pack to serve yours. Consider the debt settled. Cormac didn't even glance at them. I'll inspect them myself. He moved toward the line, and Sable's heart hammered against her ribs. She kept her eyes down, the way she'd been trained. Don't look at alphas. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't exist unless they need you to. His footsteps stopped at the first Omega, a young male barely out of adolescence. A long pause. The footsteps moved on. The second Omega, a female with visible scars on her arms. Another pause, longer this time. Then dismissal. The footsteps continued, stopped. Directly in front of Sable. She could see his boots. Fine leather, worn but well-maintained. She could feel the cold radiating from him, though that made no sense. Shifters ran hot, alphas especially. But this man felt like standing next to an open window in winter. The silence stretched, and then something happened that made no sense at all. A sound emerged from Cormac's chest. Low, rumbling, unmistakable. A growl. Not aggressive, not threatening. This was something deeper. Something primal. His wolf. Sable's head snapped up before she could stop herself, and their eyes met. The gray of his irises was changing, flickering. Gold threads were bleeding through the silver, the unmistakable sign of a wolf rising to the surface. His pupils dilated, his breathing changed, and for one impossible moment, Sable felt her own wolf, silent and suppressed since the trauma of that night 3 years ago, suddenly surge against her consciousness like a wave crashing against a dam. What was happening? Cormac's hand shot out and gripped her chin, tilting her face toward the light. His touch was ice cold, but his eyes burned with something she couldn't name. You, he breathed. What are you? Sable couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stare into eyes that had been dead moments ago and were now blazing with a fire that seemed ready to consume them both. Alpha Ashvane? Varen's voice cut through the moment, sharp with confusion. Is something wrong? Cormac released her chin, but he didn't step back. His wolf was still there. She could see it now, swirling behind his eyes like a storm that had been waiting 3 years to break. Her, he said. I'll take her. The hall went absolutely still. Alpha Ashvane, surely one of the others would be more. Varen started. Her. Cormac turned, and the full weight of his alpha presence crashed through the room like a physical force. Several wolves dropped to their knees involuntarily. Even Varen paled. She belongs to Ironvale now. This discussion is over. Sable stood frozen, her mind reeling. His wolf had been silent for 3 years. Everyone knew that. Everyone said he was dying because of it. But the moment he looked at her, it woke up. Why? How? What did this mean? Cormac was already walking toward the door, clearly expecting her to follow. His beta fell into step beside him, throwing Sable a sharp, assessing look that held more questions than answers. Wait. Varen's voice stopped them at the threshold. He was smiling again, but this time there was something ugly beneath it. Before you take her, Alpha Ashvan, there's something you should know about that particular Omega. Cormac paused but didn't turn. She was there that night, Varen continued, his voice dripping with false concern. 3 years ago, the night you rejected your mate. That Omega was in Thornwood, serving at the ceremony. Funny coincidence, isn't it? Sable felt her entire body go rigid with fear. No, he couldn't know that. No one knew that. She'd been so careful. Cormac turned slowly. His eyes found hers across the hall, and whatever had been burning in them moments before was now joined by something else. Suspicion. Calculation. And beneath it all, a question that hung in the air between them, heavier than any words could be. What did she know about the night that destroyed him? The carriage rattled along the mountain road, every jolt sending Sable's shoulder against the cold wooden wall. Across from her sat Cormac's Beta, a woman who had introduced herself simply as Mira and hadn't spoken since. Sable didn't mind the silence. It gave her time to think, to panic. He knows I was there, she thought, her fingernails digging into her palms. He knows. But he didn't know everything. He couldn't. If he knew the full truth, she'd already be dead. The carriage slowed, and Sable looked out the small window to see Ironvale rising before her. Where Blackmere had been all dark stone and sharp edges, Ironvale was something else entirely. The fortress sat nestled in a valley between two peaks, its walls pale granite that caught the afternoon light. Gardens lined the approach, dormant now in early winter but clearly tended with care. It looked almost welcoming. Almost. The carriage stopped, and Mira gestured for Sable to exit. She did, her legs unsteady beneath her, and found herself standing in a courtyard filled with curious eyes. Servants, guards, wolves of every rank, all watching the Omega their Alpha had inexplicably chosen. Cormac was already striding toward the main keep, not looking back to see if she followed. His cold demeanor had returned the moment they'd left Blackmere, his wolf apparently retreating back into whatever silence it had been trapped in for 3 years. But Sable had seen it. She knew it was still there. The question was why? Why her? Why now? Keep up, Mira said curtly, then followed her Alpha. Sable hurried after them, through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, past tapestries depicting wolves in battle and victory, until they reached a heavy oak door. Mira knocked twice, then pushed it open. The Alpha will see you now. Sable stepped inside, and the door closed behind her with a sound like a verdict. The room was a study, lined with books and maps, a fire burning in the hearth despite the cold that seemed to emanate from the man standing beside it. Cormac stood with his back to her, staring into the flames. You may speak freely here, he said without turning. No one will hear us. Sable swallowed. Your Highness, I don't. He turned, and she saw that his eyes were gray again. No gold, no wolf, just that flat dead winter. Don't lie to me, don't grovel, and don't waste my time. You were at Thornwood 3 years ago, at the mating ceremony. You saw what happened. It wasn't a question. Yes, Sable whispered. Tell me what you saw. She hesitated. The truth could kill her. But lies, in front of an Alpha who had just felt his wolf wake for the first time in 3 years, could be worse. I was a servant, she said carefully. Assigned to the ceremony hall. I saw you arrive. I saw you approach the woman they presented as your fated mate. And I saw you? She trailed off. Reject her. His voice was flat. Say it. Reject her, Sable repeated quietly. And then? And then chaos. Shouting. The woman collapsed. They carried her away. And you... She met his eyes despite the terror coiling in her chest. You fell to your knees. You were screaming, but no sound came out. Like something had been ripped from inside you. Cormac's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Pain, maybe. Or just the memory of it. My wolf went silent that night, he said. The moment the rejection left my mouth, it vanished. 3 years. 3 years of silence, of emptiness, of feeling like half a corpse wearing skin. He stepped closer, and despite herself, Sable stepped back. And then you walked into that hall today, and for the first time since that night, I felt him. My wolf. Awake. Aware. Reaching for you like you were the only thing in the world that mattered. Sable's breath caught. So I need to understand, Cormac continued, his voice low and dangerous. Why would my wolf, who has been dead for 3 years because I rejected my fated mate, suddenly wake for another Alpha's Omega? What are you? What are you hiding? I'm not hiding anything, Sable said, and even to her own ears it sounded like a lie. Cormac studied her for a long moment. Then he crossed to his desk and picked up a document. I'm going to make you an offer, he said. You can accept it, or you can return to Blackmere tonight. But if you stay, there will be conditions. Sable's heart hammered. What kind of conditions? You will stay in Ironvale as my mate. The word hit her like a physical blow. What? My wolf woke for you. I don't know why. I don't know what you are or what connection we share, but I know this. If you leave, he goes silent again. I felt it the moment the carriage door closed between us. He started fading. When you entered this room, he came back. Cormac set the document down. I need you. Your presence keeps him alive, and I am not ready to die. Sable couldn't breathe. You want to mate me? Just to keep your wolf awake? I want to marry you, Cormac corrected, publicly, officially, with all the rights and protections that entails. You will be Luna of Ironvale. You will have power, resources, safety. Everything Varen denied you, I will provide. It was too much. Too fast. Too impossible. But, she started. But? Cormac cut in, and his voice went even colder. You need to understand something. This is a transaction. You keep my wolf alive. I keep you protected. That is all this will ever be. Sable stared at him. You're saying, I will never love you. The words fell between them like stones into still water. Whatever I was capable of feeling died the night my wolf went silent. You will have everything a Luna could want except my heart. That no longer exists. Sable should refuse. She should demand to know more, should ask 1,000 questions, should run as far from this broken Alpha as she could. But where would she go? Back to Blackmere? Back to Varen's cruelty and contempt? Back to scrubbing floors and being invisible? Here, she would be Luna, protected, visible, perhaps even powerful. And there was something else, too. Something she couldn't name, but couldn't ignore. The way her own wolf had stirred when Cormac looked at her. The way her heart had raced when his hand touched her chin. The way, even now, she could feel a pull toward him that defied logic. If I accept, she said slowly, you'll never force me? Never hurt me? You have my word. And if I need to leave? If I decide I can't, then you leave, Cormac said simply. I won't cage you. I just need you near enough to keep him. He paused, and for a moment something raw flickered across his face. To keep him from going silent again. I can't survive that. Not again. Sable looked at this man, this Alpha who had everything and nothing, and made her decision. I accept your terms, she said quietly. Cormac nodded once. The ceremony will be in 3 days. Until then, you'll be given chambers befitting your new station. Servants, clothes, whatever you need. Thank you, Sable said, though the word felt strange in her mouth. Cormac turned back toward the fire. Don't thank me yet. You don't know what you've agreed to. Neither do you, Sable whispered, so quietly she wasn't sure he heard. But his shoulders tensed, and she knew he had. The mating ceremony of an Alpha was supposed to be a celebration. Music, feasting, wolves from allied packs gathering to witness the sacred bond. Cormac's ceremony was none of those things. The great hall of Ironvale had been prepared simply, winter flowers on the tables, candles in the sconces, the pack's banner hanging behind the dais where the officiant waited. No visiting Alphas, no elaborate rituals, no joy. This was a statement, not a celebration. Their Luna was an Omega from a rival pack. Their alpha's wolf had been silent for 3 years. There was nothing to celebrate, only necessity. Sable stood in her chambers, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The dress the servants had provided was beautiful, deep blue silk that matched the Iron Veil colors, but no amount of fine fabric could hide the truth of what she was. An Omega playing at being a Luna. A pawn in a game she didn't understand. A knock at the door made her turn. "Enter," she said. Mira stepped inside, her expression carefully neutral. "It's time." Sable nodded and followed the beta through the corridors. With each step, her heart beat faster. This was really happening. In minutes, she would be bound to Cormac Ashvane, the Hollow Alpha, and the man whose wolf had died, and then impossibly woken at the sight of her. The man who had promised never to love her. The great hall doors opened and every head turned. The whispers started immediately. Sable could hear them even over the pounding of her own pulse. "That's her? An Omega? Look at her. She's nobody. Nothing. Why would he choose her? His wolf woke for that?" Sable kept her eyes forward, fixed on the dais where Cormac waited. He stood tall and rigid in formal black, his pale eyes tracking her approach. She searched for any sign of his wolf, any flicker of gold, but found only winter gray. Was it working? Was her presence keeping his wolf awake? Or had it already begun to fade again? She reached the dais and climbed the 3 steps to stand beside him. The officiant, an elderly wolf with kind eyes, began to speak. The words washed over her in a blur. Sacred bonds, pack responsibility, Luna's duties. She heard them without processing, too aware of Cormac's presence beside her, the cold radiating from him like an open wound. Then a disturbance at the hall's entrance made everyone turn. A man strode through the doors, flanked by 2 guards whose armor bore a symbol Sable recognized instantly, a black tree with twisted roots. "Thornwood Pack." "Apologies for my late arrival," the man announced, his voice carrying easily through the silent hall. "I heard there was a mating ceremony and simply had to offer my congratulations in person." Sable felt her stomach drop. She knew him. Tall, dark-haired, with a smile that never reached his eyes and a cruelty that wore charm like a mask. Lord Ragnar of Thornwood, Varen's ally, the man who had orchestrated the ceremony 3 years ago, where everything had gone wrong. Cormac's hands clenched at his sides. "You weren't invited, Ragnar." "Wasn't I?" Ragnar pressed a hand to his chest in mock offense. "I'm wounded, Alpha Ashvane. Truly. We were such good friends once. Before." He paused meaningfully. "Well, before." The tension in the hall was suffocating. Sable could see wolves on both sides shifting, hands moving toward weapons. "Say what you came to say," Cormac growled. "Then leave." Ragnar's smile widened. "Very well. I simply came to offer a warning. And a question." His eyes slid to Sable, and something dark glittered in their depths. "Does she know, Alpha Ashvane? Does your new bride know what really happened that night in Thornwood? Does she know who you really rejected? Or have you been keeping secrets from your pretty little Omega?" Sable felt Cormac stiffen beside her. "Get out," Cormac said, his voice barely above a whisper. But it carried the weight of an alpha command that made several wolves in the hall whimper and bare their throats. Ragnar, however, simply laughed. "I'll go, for now." He began backing toward the doors, still smiling that terrible smile. "But I'll be watching, Alpha Ashvane, you and your mysterious new mate. Because something about this doesn't add up, and I do so love solving puzzles." The doors closed behind him, but the damage was done. The ceremony continued, rushed and tense, with the officiant stumbling over words and Cormac's jaw clenched so tight, Sable worried his teeth would crack. When the time came for the verbal claiming, the words felt hollow. "I claim you as mine," Cormac said flatly. "My mate, my Luna, bound by oath and pack." "I claim you as mine," Sable echoed, her voice steadier than she felt. "My mate, my Alpha, bound by oath and pack." The physical claiming would wait. They both knew that. A bite, a mark, required skin, required intimacy, required things neither of them were ready for. "You may seal the bond with a kiss," the officiant announced. The hall went silent, every eye fixed on them, waiting to see what the hollow alpha would do. Cormac turned to face her. His eyes searched hers, and something flickered in their gray depths. "What I want hasn't mattered for a very long time," he said quietly, so only she could hear. Before she could respond, he lifted her hand instead of pulling her close. His fingers were cold, so cold, as they wrapped around hers. And then he raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles that was gentle, formal, and utterly devoid of passion. The crowd murmured in confusion and disappointment. They had expected a spectacle. They had not received one. But Sable stood frozen, her hand still tingling from that brief, cold contact. Because she had felt it. Beneath his icy exterior, beneath the dead gray of his eyes, she had felt the smallest stirring. His wolf. Still there, still watching, still reaching for her, even as the man himself refused to. "It's done," Cormac said, releasing her hand. "You're Luna of Ironvale now." He turned and walked down from the dais, leaving her standing alone before the entire pack. And as the crowd dispersed in whispered speculation, Sable's gaze found the hall's entrance where Ragnar had stood moments before. What really happened that night in Thornwood? The question burned in her mind like a brand. Because Sable had been there, she had seen everything. And the truth was far worse than anyone knew. The Luna's chambers were larger than any space Sable had ever occupied. A canopied bed dominated one wall, draped in deep blue velvet. A fireplace crackled with warmth on another. Servants had laid out nightclothes, drawn a bath, and left her with murmured congratulations that felt more like condolences. Sable stood at the window, staring out at the moonlit valley below. She was Luna of Ironvale now, mate to one of the most powerful alphas in the realm, and she had never felt more alone. A knock at the connecting door made her turn. She knew who it was before she spoke. Could feel him somehow, like a thread pulled taut between them. "Enter," she said. Cormac stepped through, and Sable's breath caught despite herself. He had changed from his ceremonial clothes into something simpler, dark trousers and a loose white shirt unlaced at the collar. Without the formal armor of his station, he looked younger, more human, more vulnerable. "I came to check on you," he said, stopping several feet away. The ceremony was difficult. Because of Ragnar? A muscle ticked in his jaw. Among other things. Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken questions. Sable knew she should let it be, should accept the distance he so clearly wanted. But the question that had been burning in her since the ceremony clawed its way up her throat. "What did he mean?" she asked. "About what really happened at Thornwood? About who you really rejected?" Cormac's expression shuddered. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." Sable stepped closer, then stopped when she saw him tense. "You said you rejected your fated mate, but Ragnar implied there was more, something you're hiding." For a long moment, Cormac said nothing. The fire crackled, the wind whispered against the windows. And then, so quietly she almost missed it, he spoke. "The woman they presented to me that night wasn't my fated mate." Sable's heart stuttered. "What?" "The bond was fabricated, manufactured through dark magic. I didn't know it at the time. I only knew that something felt wrong, that the pull I was supposed to feel was hollow, artificial." His hands clenched at his sides. "So I rejected her. I thought I was rejecting a lie. I thought I was being true to myself. But your wolf." "My wolf knew." Cormac's voice cracked, just slightly. "He knew what I didn't, that the rejection, even of a false bond, would trigger consequences, that whoever had orchestrated the deception had built in a failsafe. The moment I spoke the words, my wolf was ripped from me." Sable couldn't breathe. "Someone did this to you deliberately?" "Yes." "Who?" Cormac's eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw something other than cold control in their depths. She saw rage, grief, a wound 3 years old that had never stopped bleeding. "I don't know," he said, But I will find out. And when I do, nothing in this world will save them from what I'll become. The intensity of his words made her shiver. Not with fear, but with something else. Understanding, perhaps. Recognition. She knew what it was like to be broken by forces beyond your control. She knew the hunger for answers that never came. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for what was done to you." Cormac blinked, as if the words surprised him. "You believe me? Why wouldn't I? Because no one else does. The other alphas think I rejected a true mate out of arrogance, that my wolf's silence is divine punishment for my pride." He laughed bitterly. "Even my own pack whispers about it." Sable moved before she could stop herself, crossing the distance between them until she stood close enough to touch. She didn't touch him, not yet, but she let him feel her presence. Her warmth. "I believe you," she said simply. Something changed in his expression. The ice cracked, just slightly. And then, slowly, as if the movement cost him everything, he reached out and brushed his fingers against her cheek. His touch was cold, so cold it made her gasp. "I'm sorry," he said, pulling back immediately. "I should have warned you. My wolf's silence affects my body. Without him, I can't regulate my temperature. I'm always cold. Always. Dying." Sable finished quietly. Cormac didn't deny it. "How long?" she asked. "How long do you have?" "The healers say a year. Maybe 2 if my wolf stays awake." His gray eyes searched hers. "That's why I need you, Sable. Not because I want to use you, but because you're the only thing keeping him alive, keeping me alive." The weight of that truth pressed down on her. She was his lifeline, his hope, the only thing standing between him and a slow, cold death. It should have felt like a burden. Instead, it felt like purpose. "Then I'll stay," she said, "for as long as you need me." Cormac stared at her as if she had spoken in a language he didn't understand. "Why?" "Because you didn't have to tell me the truth tonight. You could have kept your secrets, kept your walls. But you didn't." She met his gaze without flinching. "You trusted me. Let me trust you back." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The fire crackled. The moon hung silver outside the window. And then Cormac did something she never expected. He bowed his head. Not a full bow, not the gesture of a subordinate, but an acknowledgement, a recognition of something passing between them that neither had words for. "Good night, Luna," he said softly. "Good night, Alpha," she replied. He left through the connecting door, and Sable stood alone in the firelight, her cheek still tingling from his icy touch. She pressed her fingers to the spot where his hand had been, and realized, with a start that shook her to her core, that she wanted him to touch her again. 3 weeks passed in a blur of small moments and quiet transformations. Sable learned the rhythms of Iron Vale, the servants who gossiped about her in corners but served her with growing respect. The pack members who watched her with suspicion slowly softening to curiosity. The weight of being Luna settling onto her shoulders like a mantle she was still learning to wear. But mostly, she learned Cormac. He came to her chambers every evening. At first the visits were brief. A few words, a check on her well-being, then retreat. But as the days passed, the visits lengthened. He would stay to share a meal, then to sit by the fire, then to talk long into the night about pack politics, about border disputes, about everything and nothing at all. He never touched her. Not since that first night when his cold fingers had brushed her cheek. But she felt him watching her constantly, those pale eyes tracking her movements with an intensity that made her skin prickle. And she began watching him back. She noticed things. The way he rubbed his chest when he thought no one was looking, as if trying to reach the wolf that slumbered within. The way his hands shook sometimes, tremors he tried to hide. The way he would pause mid-sentence, his eyes flickering with gold for just an instant before fading back to gray. His wolf was still there, still fighting to stay awake, still reaching for her. But each day the gold came less often. The cold in his skin grew more pronounced. The shadows under his eyes deepened. He was still dying. Just slower. "You're worried about him," Mira said one afternoon, finding Sable staring out the window at the training yard below where Cormac was working with the pack warriors. Sable didn't deny it. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to everyone with eyes." Mira came to stand beside her. "He's different since you arrived. Less closed off. Almost. Almost what?" "Almost alive again." Mira's voice softened in a way Sable hadn't heard before. "I've served him since we were children. I was there when his wolf went silent. I watched him hollow out, piece by piece, until I wasn't sure there was anything left inside him. But now—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "Now? Now he asks the cooks what your favorite foods are. He has the gardeners cultivating flowers for your chambers. Last night, I caught him pacing outside your door for 10 minutes before he finally knocked." Mira turned to face her. "He's not just keeping you close because of his wolf, Luna. Whatever he tells himself, whatever walls he puts up, there's more happening here." Sable's heart raced at the words. "He said he would never love me, that he's not capable of it anymore." "He says a lot of things." Mira's expression was unreadable. "But his wolf disagrees, and the wolf never lies." That night, when Cormac came to her chambers, Sable tried something different. Instead of sitting in her usual chair by the fire, she sat on the small sofa. And when he moved to take the chair across from her, she patted the cushion beside her. He froze. "Sable. Please." She kept her voice gentle. "You're always so far away. Just for tonight. Will you sit with me?" For a long moment she thought he would refuse. Every line of his body screamed tension, control, the desperate need to maintain distance. Then, slowly, he crossed the room and lowered himself onto the sofa beside her. They sat in silence, inches apart, the fire painting shadows across their faces. Sable could feel the cold radiating from him even through the space between them. Could hear his breathing, carefully controlled. "Talk to me," she said quietly. "Tell me something about yourself that no one else knows." Cormac turned his head to look at her. In the firelight, his eyes seemed warmer somehow, less like ice, and more like smoke. "My wolf's name is Fenric," he said after a long pause. "I haven't said that out loud in 3 years, not since he went silent. It felt wrong somehow, speaking his name when he couldn't answer." Sable's chest tightened. "But he can answer now. When you're near me, he's awake." "Yes." Cormac's voice was barely above a whisper. "And do you know what he says? What he's been saying every moment since he woke?" "What?" "Mate." The word hung in the air between them. "He calls you mate. Over and over. As if he's trying to tell me something I'm too broken to understand." Sable's breath caught. "But we're not. I mean, the bond isn't." "I know." Cormac's hands were shaking. She could see them trembling in his lap, and before she could stop herself, she reached out and covered them with her own. His skin was so cold it almost burned, but she didn't pull away. "You're freezing," she murmured. "I'm always freezing." But he didn't pull away either. Instead, his fingers slowly, tentatively, turned to interlock with hers. "Except when you touch me?" Sable looked down at their joined hands, her warmth against his cold, her steadiness against his trembling. "Then I won't stop," she said simply. Cormac made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. "You don't understand what you're offering. Then help me understand." He lifted his free hand and cupped her face, his cold palm settling against her flushed cheek. His thumb traced her cheekbone with aching gentleness. "I told myself I chose you to survive," he said quietly. "I told myself this was a transaction, nothing more. That I could keep you at arm's length, use your presence to quiet my wolf, and never let myself feel anything. And now?" His eyes searched hers, and for the first time she saw the gold bleeding through the gray, not flickering, burning. "Now I'm terrified," he whispered, "because I'm starting to feel something. And I don't know if that makes me alive again, or if it's just going to kill me faster." Sable's heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear herself think. Cormac. Don't. He pulled back, breaking contact so suddenly it left her cold in his absence. Don't say anything. I shouldn't have. I can't. He was on his feet before she could stop him, already moving toward the door. Wait, Sable called out. He paused, his hand on the door handle, but didn't turn. I'm starting to feel something too, she said to his back. I thought you should know. Cormac stood frozen for a long moment. His shoulders rose and fell with a breath that seemed to shake his entire body. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. Sable sat alone on the sofa, her hands still warm from his cold skin, her heart still racing from words that could never be unsaid. She was falling in love with him, and she had no idea if that would save him or destroy them both. The message arrived at dawn. Sable was still in bed when Mira burst through her chambers, her face pale with an urgency that made Sable's blood chill. You need to come, Mira said. Now. Sable didn't ask questions. She threw on a robe and followed the beta through corridors still dark with early morning shadow, her bare feet slapping against cold stone. They reached the Alpha's chambers, and Mira pushed open the doors without knocking. Cormac was on the floor. Sable's heart stopped. He lay crumpled beside his bed, his body convulsing, and his skin so pale it was almost translucent. And the cold that rolled off him, she could feel it from across the room. It was like stepping into a winter storm. What happened? She demanded, rushing to his side. I don't know. Mira's voice cracked. The guards heard a crash. They found him like this. Sable dropped to her knees and pulled Cormac's head into her lap. His skin was ice against her hands. His lips were blue. His eyes, when they fluttered open, were completely gray. No gold. Not even a flicker. Fenric, Sable whispered, using his wolf's name instinctively. Fenric, can you hear me? Cormac's mouth moved, but no sound came out. He's been fading for hours, Mira said, kneeling beside them. The servants heard him pacing all night, talking to himself, then screaming, then silence. Sable's mind raced. Last night, their conversation, the way he'd pulled away and fled. Had something happened after he left her chambers? Had someone... Send for the healers, she ordered. They're already on their way. Sable looked down at Cormac's face, at the man who had been so careful to keep her at distance, so terrified of feeling anything. And she made a decision. She bent down and pressed her forehead to his. The cold was excruciating, like pressing her face to frozen metal. But she didn't pull away. Instead, she poured every ounce of warmth she had into the contact, willing her heat into his frozen body, willing her presence to reach whatever remained of his wolf. Come back, she whispered against his icy skin. Come back to me. I know you're in there. I know you can hear me. Please, Cormac. Please. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, so faint she almost missed it, she felt a stirring. Not physical. Something deeper. Something that brushed against her consciousness like a wolf's muzzle seeking recognition. Fenric. That's it, she breathed. That's it. I'm here. I'm not leaving. Cormac's body shuddered. His hand moved, fingers finding her wrist and gripping with what little strength remained. Sable. His voice was barely audible. Something's wrong. I know. But you're going to be okay. The healers are coming. No. His grip tightened and his eyes opened fully. Gray, still gray, but with the faintest thread of gold fighting to break through. Not me. You. They're coming. For you. Before she could ask what he meant, a commotion erupted outside the chamber. Shouts, the clash of weapons, a scream that was cut brutally short. The doors burst open, and Sable felt her entire body go cold with dread. Ragnar of Thornwood strode into the chamber, flanked by warriors in black armor. His smile was the same as at the ceremony, cruel and knowing, but now there was triumph in it. Well, well, he said, looking down at Cormac's collapsed form with undisguised satisfaction. The hollow alpha finally hollowed out completely. How poetic. Sable rose to her feet, placing herself between Ragnar and Cormac's prone body. Get out. I think not. Ragnar's eyes gleamed. You see, I've come to retrieve something that belongs to me, or rather, someone. He nodded to his guards, and they moved forward. Mira launched herself at them, but she was one wolf against 6. They had her pinned in seconds. Ragnar stepped closer to Sable, and she could smell him now. Power and corruption and something else. Something that made her Omega Wolf recoil in instinctive terror. Did you really think you could hide forever, Sable? He asked softly. Did you really think changing packs, changing names, would erase what you are, what you witnessed? Sable stood frozen. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, but you do. Ragnar reached out and gripped her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. You were there that night. You saw what we did to the false mate. You saw the ritual that ripped out his wolf, and you ran before we could silence you properly. Behind her, she heard Cormac make a sound of rage, tried to rise, failed. But now, Ragnar continued, his smile widening, you've done something very foolish. You've bonded yourself to the one wolf we needed to keep broken, and that simply cannot be allowed. He released her chin and stepped back, gesturing to his guards. Take her, he ordered. Kill the Alpha, and burn Iron Veil to the ground. The guards moved forward, and Sable's world collapsed into chaos. But before they could reach her, before she could even scream, something impossible happened. A roar tore through the chamber. Not human, not wolf. Something older, something primal, something that made every wolf in the room freeze in instinctive terror. Cormac rose. His body, broken moments ago, was transforming. Bones cracking, muscles shifting, fur erupting across skin that was no longer cold but burning with heat. His eyes blazed gold, pure gold, brighter than any wolf Sable had ever seen. Fenric wasn't just awake anymore. He was enraged. The wolf that stood where Cormac had been was massive, larger than any natural creature, with fur the color of midnight and eyes that burned like twin suns. And when he lunged, it was with a speed that made the movement invisible. 2 of Ragnar's guards were dead before they could scream. Impossible, Ragnar breathed, stumbling backward. His wolf was dead. I made sure of it. But the wolf wasn't listening. Wasn't stopping. And neither was the bond that suddenly exploded through Sable's consciousness like a lightning strike, flooding her with sensations she couldn't name, feelings that weren't hers, a connection so overwhelming that she dropped to her knees with a cry. Not just his wolf waking, a mate bond, real, true, undeniable. She was his fated mate. She had always been his fated mate. And someone had gone to unimaginable lengths to keep them apart. The last thing Sable saw before darkness claimed her was the black wolf tearing through Ragnar's guards, heading straight for the man who had orchestrated their destruction. And in the chaos, one thought burned through her fading consciousness. Everything she thought she knew had been a lie. Sable woke to the smell of blood and ash. She was lying on cold stone, her body aching, her mind swimming with fragments of memory. The attack. Ragnar's cruel smile. Cormac's transformation, and that bond, that impossible, overwhelming bond that had crashed through her like a tidal wave. She pushed herself up, her vision swimming, and took in the devastation around her. The Alpha's chambers were destroyed. Furniture splintered, walls gouged with claw marks, bodies of Ragnar's guards scattered like broken dolls. And in the center of it all, surrounded by carnage, stood Cormac. Human again. Naked, covered in blood that wasn't his own, his chest heaving with ragged breaths. His eyes were still gold, still blazing, and his wolf so close to the surface that Sable could almost see Fenric staring out at her. Cormac, she breathed. His head snapped toward her, and for a moment something feral flickered across his features. Then recognition flooded in, and he crossed the room in 3 strides, dropping to his knees beside her. You're alive. His voice was hoarse, wrecked. His hands found her face, her shoulders, checking for injuries with desperate urgency. When you collapsed, when I felt the bond and then felt you go silent, I thought, I'm okay. She caught his hands, stilling their frantic movement. I'm okay. But Ragnar, Cormac's expression darkened. Gone. His remaining guards dragged him out while I was... He paused, something like shame flickering across his features. While I was lost in the rage, Fenric wouldn't let me stop, wouldn't let me think. All he wanted was blood. Because they threatened your mate, Sable said quietly. The word hung between them. Mate. Real and undeniable now. Not a title given by ceremony, but a truth written in their very souls. You knew, Cormac said, and it wasn't a question. You were at Thornwood that night. You saw what they did. You knew I had a true mate, and it wasn't the woman they presented. Sable's heart clenched. This was it. The moment she'd been dreading since she first felt his wolf stir in that auction hall. Yes, she whispered. I knew. Tell me. His grip on her hands tightened. Tell me everything. So she did. I was a servant at Thornwood, like I said. But I wasn't assigned to the ceremony hall by accident. I was placed there because of what I am. She took a shaky breath. My mother was an Omega with a rare gift. She could sense mate bonds, see the threads that connected fated pairs. It's why Thornwood kept her, why they kept me after she died. We were useful for their breeding programs, their political matches. Cormac's eyes widened with understanding. You could see the bonds. I could see yours. Sable's voice broke. I was 14 years old, hiding behind a pillar, watching the ceremony. And when you walked toward that woman, I saw nothing. No thread. No connection. She wasn't your mate. But I could see your true bond. Faint and distant, leading somewhere else entirely. Where? The word was barely audible. Sable met his eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. To me, she whispered. The thread led to me. I was your fated mate, Cormac. I was 14 and terrified, and I watched them present a false woman to you. Watched you reject her. Watched your wolf get ripped away. And I did nothing. I said nothing. I ran. The silence that followed was deafening. Cormac stared at her, his expression unreadable. The gold in his eyes flickered, wavered. You've known for 3 years, he said slowly. You've known we were mates. And you never came forward. Never told anyone. Never tried to find me. I was a child. A powerless Omega in a pack that would have killed me for what I knew. The words poured out of her in a desperate flood. By the time I was old enough to do anything, you were the Hollow Alpha, surrounded by guards and politics and an entire kingdom. And I was nothing. Less than nothing. What was I supposed to do? Walk up to your gates and announce that I was your true mate? They would have laughed. They would have killed me. And you. She choked on a sob. You were already dying. What good would it have done? You could have saved me, Cormac said, and his voice cracked on the words. 3 years, Sable. 3 years of silence and cold and feeling like half a corpse. 3 years of believing I was cursed for rejecting a bond I never should have rejected. And you could have ended it at any time. I didn't know, Sable cried. I didn't know my presence would wake your wolf. I didn't know the bond worked that way. I thought you needed your true mate to accept you, not the other way around. I thought I was useless. You thought wrong. The words were cold, final. And when Cormac released her hands and stood, Sable felt the distance between them like a physical wound. Cormac, please. I need time. He wouldn't look at her. I need to think, to process. Everything I believed about that night, about my wolf, about you. It's all different now. And I don't know what to do with that. He walked toward the ruined door, stepping over bodies without seeming to see them. I'm sorry, Sable called after him, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry. I should have been braver. I should have found a way. I've hated myself for 3 years for what I didn't do. But I love you now. And I can't change the past. But I can be here now. Please, please don't shut me out. Cormac paused at the threshold. You love me, he repeated, his back still turned. Yes. Even knowing I might not be able to forgive you? Yes. A long silence. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. My wolf loves you too. He never stopped reaching for you even when he was silent. Even when he was dying. Some part of him always knew. Cormac's shoulders tensed. But I'm not my wolf. And I don't know if I can. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The door closed behind him, and Sable was left alone in the wreckage, her heart shattered into pieces that matched the destruction around her. 2 days passed in silence. Cormac didn't come to her chambers, didn't summon her, didn't send word. Sable existed in a limbo of waiting, of hoping, of dreading, while the pack buzzed with whispers about the attack and what it meant. Ragnar had escaped. His remaining forces had retreated to Thornwood, and war was coming. Everyone could feel it. But Sable couldn't think about war, could only think about the man who was her mate, who had every right to hate her, who she had failed in the worst possible way. On the 3rd day, Mira came to her chambers. The Alpha has called a council meeting, the Beta said, her expression carefully neutral. Your presence is required. Sable's heart lurched. Required? He didn't explain, but Sable... Mira hesitated, something like sympathy flickering in her eyes. Whatever happens in there, whatever he says, know that his wolf has been howling for you since you've been apart. He can barely keep Fenric contained. Whatever his human heart is struggling with, his wolf has already made its choice. It should have been comforting. It wasn't. Sable followed Mira to the council chamber where a dozen of Ironvale's highest-ranking wolves sat around a massive table. At its head sat Cormac, his face a mask of controlled calm. He didn't look at her as she entered. Now that everyone is present, he said, his voice flat, we can address the true purpose of this meeting. The attack 3 days ago wasn't random. It was the culmination of a conspiracy that has been unfolding for years. A conspiracy that I now understand completely. He gestured, and a guard brought forward a bound prisoner. Sable felt her stomach drop. It wasn't Ragnar. It was a woman, older, with iron-gray hair and eyes that burned with defiant hatred. She wore the robes of a mystic, the kind of wolf who dealt in rituals and ancient magic. This is Veshra, Cormac said. She was captured trying to flee Thornwood after the attack. She was Ragnar's pet witch, and she was the one who performed the ritual 3 years ago that severed my wolf. Gasps rippled through the council. But there's more. Cormac's eyes finally found Sable's, and she saw something terrible in their depths. Pain, betrayal, and beneath it all, a desperate hope he was trying to crush. Tell them, Veshra. Tell them who ordered the ritual. Tell them who has been pulling Ragnar's strings all along. The witch laughed, a bitter, broken sound. You think Ragnar had the intelligence to orchestrate this? He was a puppet, a useful fool. Her eyes swept the room with contempt. The one who wanted you broken, Alpha Ashvane, the one who has wanted Ironvale's power for decades, is much closer than you realize. A name, Cormac growled. Veshra smiled. Varen, she said. Alpha Varen of Blackmere, the man who sent your precious mate to you as a tribute, hoping she would finish what we started. Hoping her presence would finally kill what remained of your wolf. The room erupted in chaos, but Sable barely heard it. Her mind was spinning, connecting pieces she should have seen before. Varen, her former Alpha, the man who had treated her with contempt for 3 years, who had called her worthless, who had sent her to Ironvale as disposal. He hadn't been disposing of her. He'd been using her. He knew what I was, Sable breathed. He knew I was Cormac's mate. That's why he kept me isolated, kept me weak. He was saving me, waiting for the right moment to deploy me as a weapon. Yes, Cormac's voice was hollow. The bond between true mates is powerful, but it can also be corrupted, twisted. If you had arrived here still loyal to Blackmere, still under Varen's influence, your presence might have driven my wolf mad instead of waking him. Might have killed me faster instead of healing me. But I wasn't loyal to him, Sable said desperately. I hated him. I've always hated him. I know. Something softened, just slightly, in Cormac's expression. That's the only reason you're not in chains beside her. The words hurt, but Sable understood them. What happens now? She asked. Cormac rose from his seat, his full alpha presence flooding the room. Now we go to war, he said. Varen and Ragnar have conspired against Ironvale for 3 years. They have attacked my home, endangered my pack, and tried to destroy my mate. His eyes blazed gold. They will answer for it, all of them. The council roared their approval, but Sable saw what they didn't. The way Cormac's hands trembled at his sides, the pallor beneath his skin, the cold that still radiated from him despite his wolf's awakening. The bond was helping. But it wasn't enough. He was still dying, and going to war would only accelerate it. Cormac, she said, stepping forward. You can't lead an army like this. Your wolf is awake, but your body is still damaged. 3 years of separation took its toll. You need time to heal. Time is a luxury we don't have. His voice was hard. Varen knows his plan failed. He'll be preparing his defenses. If we don't strike now, then let me help. The words came out before she could stop them. The mate bond, it heals. It restores. If we complete it, if we do the physical claiming, maybe it will be enough to... No. Cormac cut her off, his expression closing like a door slamming shut. I won't use you like that. I won't claim you just to save myself. It wouldn't be using me. I said no. He turned away, addressing the council. We march at dawn. Prepare the warriors. The council dispersed, and Sable was left standing alone as Cormac walked past her without another word. But this time, she didn't let him go. She followed him into the corridor, grabbed his arm, and spun him to face her. You stubborn, impossible man, she hissed. You're going to die. Don't you understand that? You're going to lead your pack into battle, and you're going to die. And I will have to watch it happen knowing I could have saved you. Better that than claiming you out of desperation. His voice was ragged. You deserve better than a mate who only completes the bond because he's afraid to die. And what about what I deserve? Sable demanded. What about my choice? You've spent 3 years without your wolf, without your mate, without any say in what happened to you. Don't do the same thing to me. Don't take away my agency because you think you're protecting me. Cormac stared at her, his chest heaving. If I claim you, he said slowly, and I survive, there's no going back. You'll be bound to me forever. A man who may never be able to fully forgive you for hiding the truth. A man who's been broken so completely he doesn't know if he can love properly anymore. I don't want proper love, Sable said fiercely. I want you. Broken and angry and struggling. I want all of it. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worth the risk if you'll just let me try. The gold in his eyes blazed, and then he was kissing her. Not gentle, not careful. This was 3 years of loneliness and longing and desperate hope crashing together like colliding stars. His mouth was still cold against hers, but warming with every second, and when his arms wrapped around her, pulling her against his chest, she felt something shift in the universe itself. The bond sang between them, demanding completion. Are you sure? He gasped against her lips. Yes. Always yes. He lifted her like she weighed nothing and carried her toward his chambers, and Sable knew that whatever came next, whatever war awaited, whatever forgiveness still needed to be earned, this moment was exactly where she was meant to be. Dawnlight filtered through the windows as Sable woke in Cormac's arms. Everything was different now. She could feel him in her mind, a constant warm presence where before there had been only silence. Could feel his heartbeat as clearly as her own, could sense his wolf, Fenric, curled contentedly in some shared mental space, finally at peace. The claiming had changed them both. Sable lifted her head from Cormac's chest and looked at him. Really looked, and her breath caught. His skin was warm. Not the burning heat of a healthy alpha. Not yet, but warm. Human. Alive. The blue had faded from his lips. The shadows had retreated from under his eyes. And when he opened his eyes to meet her gaze, the gray was shot through with permanent threads of gold. "How do you feel?" she whispered. "Like I've been asleep for 3 years and finally woken up." His voice was rough with emotion. "Like I can breathe again. Think again. Feel again." His hand came up to cup her face, and the warmth of his palm made her eyes sting with tears. "You did this. You brought me back." "We brought each other back," she corrected softly. He kissed her, slow and deep, and when they finally broke apart, she saw something in his expression she had never seen before. "I forgive you," he said quietly. "I've been lying here for hours, feeling you in my soul, and I understand now. You were a child, powerless and afraid. You did what you had to do to survive. And when the time came, when fate finally brought us together, you didn't run. You stayed. You fought for me even when I was pushing you away." Tears spilled down Sable's cheeks. "Cormac, I love you." The words came out fierce, certain. "I don't know when it started. Maybe the moment my wolf woke at that auction. Maybe the night you held my freezing hands and refused to let go. Maybe it's been building since that ceremony 3 years ago, when some part of me felt the thread between us even without knowing what it was. But I love you, Sable, and I'm done pretending I don't." She kissed him again, tasting salt and joy and a future she had never dared to imagine. A knock at the door interrupted them. "Alpha," Mira's voice came through the wood. "The scouts have returned. You need to see this." They dressed quickly and made their way to the war room, where a grim-faced scout stood waiting. "Varen's forces are mobilizing," the scout reported. "But not toward us. They're retreating deeper into Blackmere territory. Taking everything they can carry. It looks like they're running," Cormac finished, his eyes narrowing. "There's more." The scout shifted uncomfortably. "Ragnar of Thornwood was found dead this morning, killed by his own pack after word spread about what he did to you, Alpha. His wolves turned on him when they learned the truth of his conspiracy. The alliance is crumbling. Varen's allies are abandoning him." Sable felt a fierce satisfaction burn in her chest. "Then we end this today," Cormac said. "No drawn-out war. No siege. We go to Blackmere, we find Varen, and we finish it." He turned to Sable, and she saw the question in his eyes. "Together," she said firmly. "I'm coming with you." "It could be dangerous." "I don't care." She straightened her spine, feeling her Omega Wolf rise alongside the Luna she had become. "Varen used me, manipulated me, tried to turn me into a weapon against my own mate. I want to be there when he falls." Cormac studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded, something like pride flickering in his expression. "Together, then." The journey to Blackmere took half a day. Cormac's forces moved like shadows through the mountains, silent and deadly, arriving at the fortress gates as the sun began its descent. The gates were open, abandoned. Inside, the great hall where Sable had once stood on an auction block was empty save for one figure. Varen sat on his throne, alone, a goblet of wine in his hand, and a smile on his face that didn't reach his eyes. "Alpha Ashvane," he said pleasantly, "and my little Omega, returned to me at last. Though I suppose you're not so little anymore, are you? Luna of Iron Vale, quite the advancement." "It's over, Varen." Cormac's voice echoed through the empty hall. "Your allies are dead or scattered. Your pack has abandoned you. You have nothing left." "Nothing," Varen laughed. "I have satisfaction. 3 years of watching you suffer. 3 years of knowing I broke the great Alpha Ashvane. Even if I die today, that was worth everything." "Why?" Sable stepped forward, unable to contain the question that had burned in her for so long. Why do any of this? What did Cormac ever do to you? Varen's smile twisted into something ugly. He existed, the Alpha spat. His bloodline has dominated these territories for centuries, while packs like mine scraped for scraps of power. His father humiliated mine at every opportunity. And when I learned about the true mate bond, when I discovered a way to destroy him without lifting a finger, he shrugged. How could I resist? You destroyed yourself, Cormac said coldly. Everything you built, everyone who followed you, gone. For petty revenge against a man you never bothered to know. Perhaps. Varen rose from his throne, and Sable saw the knife hidden in his other hand. But I can still take one more thing from you. He lunged toward Sable. Cormac moved faster. But it was Sable who met Varen head-on. Something erupted from deep within her, something she had never known she possessed. Power, raw and primal. The Omega gift her mother had passed down, but that had never fully manifested until now. Until the mate bond completed her. Unlocked what had always been waiting inside. She could see the bonds now. All of them. Every connection between every wolf in the room, bright threads of gold and silver weaving through the air. And she could see the darkness wrapped around Varen's soul. The corruption. The empty place where his own wolf had withered from years of cruelty and spite. You wanted to break bonds, Sable said, her voice resonating with power she didn't fully understand. You severed my mate from his wolf. You tried to corrupt what should have been sacred. She reached out, not physically but with something deeper, and grasped the writhing darkness within him. Let me show you what true breaking feels like. Varen screamed. It wasn't a sound any wolf should make. It was the shriek of a soul being torn apart, of every corrupt thread he had woven being ripped away at once. When Sable released him, he crumpled to the ground, unconscious but alive. Broken, just as he had tried to break them. Cormac caught her as her knees gave out, the unfamiliar power draining from her as quickly as it had come. What was that? He breathed, staring at her with something like awe. I don't know, Sable admitted, trembling in his arms. But I think my mother's gift was more than just seeing bonds. I think she could affect them. And now, so can I. Cormac held her tighter, his warm body anchoring her to the present. Then we're going to figure it out, he promised. Together. Behind them, Ironvale's warriors flooded into the hall, securing Varen's fallen form and claiming Blackmere in their alpha's name. The war was over before it truly began. 6 months later, Sable stood in the gardens of Ironvale, watching spring flowers bloom across the valley. So much had changed. Varen remained imprisoned, his wolf permanently silenced by whatever Sable had done to him that day in Blackmere. The healers said he would live, but he would never shift again. Never feel the connection to his pack, never know anything but the hollow emptiness he had tried to inflict on others. Justice, Sable thought, though she took no pleasure in it. Only relief that it was over. Thornwood had submitted to Ironvale after Ragnar's death at the hands of his own wolves, their new alpha, a young woman named Kira, who had reached out in good faith, appalled by what her predecessor had done. The territories were peaceful now, more peaceful than they had been in generations, and Sable herself had changed most of all. She was training with Veshra, the captured witch, who had traded her knowledge for a reduced sentence. Learning to understand and control the gift her mother had passed down. Learning to see the bonds between all living things and, when necessary, to mend them. She had already helped 3 mated pairs whose bonds had been damaged by trauma or separation, had reunited wolves with their animals after accidents that should have severed them forever. Her gift, once a source of fear and hiding, had become something precious, something that healed instead of broke. You're thinking too hard again. Cormac's voice came from behind her, warm with affection. Sable turned to find her mate approaching through the flowers, Fenric's gold glowing permanently in his gray eyes now. He moved differently these days, easily, without pain. The cold that had plagued him for 3 years was nothing but a memory. I'm thinking about how far we've come, she said, leaning into him as his arms wrapped around her. And how far we have to go. His hand settled on her stomach, still flat, but not for much longer. The pack healer had confirmed it just that morning. Are you scared? Sable asked softly. Terrified, Cormac admitted, but the good kind. The kind that means something precious is coming. She turned in his arms to face him, this man who had been a hollow shell when she met him and was now more alive than anyone she had ever known. I love you, she said, because she would never tire of saying it. I love you, he replied, because he would never tire of hearing it. In the distance, Mira called out that visitors were arriving, dignitaries from allied packs coming to celebrate Iron Vale's new era of prosperity. The pack was thriving, happy, whole. But for this moment, it was just the two of them. A rejected Omega who had hidden a truth that could have changed everything. A broken Alpha who had learned to feel again, and a love that had survived secrets and curses and 3 years of separation to become something unbreakable. They'll write stories about us, Cormac murmured against her hair. The Luna who could see bonds and the Alpha whose wolf went silent. Let them, Sable said, rising on her toes to kiss him. As long as we get to write the ending ourselves. He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that still made her heart skip every time. I think we already did. And wrapped in each other's arms as spring bloomed around them, surrounded by a pack that had become family and a future bright with possibility, they had. The end. Thank you for listening to this story. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. I read everyone, and they mean more than you know.